I never thought my own son would abandon me like garbage on the side of the road. 3 weeks after burying my husband Harold, Derek drove me 4 hours into the middle of nowhere, dumped my suitcase on the porch of this crumbling family estate, and drove away without looking back. No phone service, no neighbors for miles, no car. Just me and the suffocating silence. But when I opened that closet door on my second night here, I screamed so loud the walls shook. The first 2 days at Harold's childhood estate felt like being buried alive. I wandered through rooms filled with dust-covered furniture and faded family photographs, eating cold soup straight from the can, because I couldn't figure out how to work the ancient gas stove. Every creak of the old wooden floors made me jump. The silence was so complete it felt like cotton stuffed in my ears. Derek had driven me here in his pickup truck, barely speaking the entire 4-hour journey through winding country roads that seemed to lead nowhere. When we finally arrived at the sprawling farmhouse nestled between rolling hills and thick woods, Head grabbed my single suitcase and practically thrown it onto the sagging front porch. "You'll find peace here, Mom," Head said, not meeting my eyes. Dad always talked about how much this place meant to him. "It'll be therapeutic. Good for your grief." Then Head climbed back into his truck and driven off, leaving me standing there in my black funeral dress, watching his taillights disappear around a bend. The house had no internet, no cable television, no cell phone service. The landline had been disconnected years ago. Derek assured me He'd take care of everything regarding Harold's affairs and would check on me soon. I felt like it'd been erased from the world. On that second night, shivering under a thin blanket I'd found in the linen closet, I decided to search for something warmer. Harold used to tell stories about spending summers here as a boy, but I'd never visited. The master bedroom felt like a museum of his childhood, with model airplanes on the windowsill and old baseball trophies gathering dust on the dresser. That's when I noticed the closet door. It had a small padlock that looked newer than everything else in the room. Something about it nagged at me. Harold had been such a private man in his final years, always secretive about his business dealings, always telling me not to worry about finances. I found a hammer in the kitchen toolbox and broke the lock. My hands were shaking as I pulled open the door, expecting to find old clothes or childhood treasures. Instead, I found dozens of manila folders stacked neatly on wooden shelves, along with financial documents, bank statements, and Harold's personal leather journal, the one I'd bought him for Christmas 5 years ago, the one he claimed he never used. My heart pounded as I opened the first folder. Bank records showing massive withdrawals I knew nothing about. Forged signatures that looked like Harold's but weren't quite right. Transfer documents moving money from Harold's business accounts to accounts I'd never heard of. Then I saw Derek's name on the signature lines. My son had been stealing from his father for over 3 years. I sank to the floor, papers scattered around me like leaves. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars, systematically drained from the construction business Harold had built over 30 years. Derek had been forging checks, authorizing electronic transfers, even creating fake invoices for non-existent work. With trembling fingers, I opened Harold's journal to a random page. His familiar handwriting filled the lined paper, but the words made my blood turn to ice. "Derek brought me my insulin today. Something's wrong. The injections make me feel strange, dizzy, much worse than usual. I've been keeping track, and my blood sugar levels don't match what he's telling me. I think he's been adjusting my medication. But why would my own son want to hurt me?" I flipped through more pages, watching Harold's growing suspicion and fear unfold in his careful handwriting. He'd figured out the financial theft months before his death. He'd been gathering evidence, planning to confront Derek, preparing to go to the authorities. But Harold died before he could act. The journal's final entry was dated the day before Harold's fatal diabetic episode. The day Derek had come over to help with his father's evening medication routine, the same routine Derek had been managing for months as a nurse practitioner. "Derek's bringing my special insulin tonight. The new kind, he says, will help regulate my levels better. But I'm scared. I found the real vials hidden in his car trunk. Has been giving me something else entirely. If something happens to me, I pray Anitra finds this journal. She deserves to know the truth about our son." I pressed the journal to my chest and wept, not just for Harold, but for the terrible knowledge that my husband had died alone, scared, and knowing his own son was killing him. Derek hadn't just stolen Harold's money. He'd stolen Harold's life. I spent the entire night reading Harold's journal by the light of a flickering table lamp, Each page revealed another piece of Derek's calculated betrayal, building a picture of systematic murder disguised as medical care. Harold had started keeping the journal when he first noticed discrepancies in his business accounts. Initially, Head thought it was simple bookkeeping errors. But Derek was smart. As Harold's nurse practitioner son, who managed his diabetes care, Derek had intimate knowledge of how to manipulate insulin levels to create natural diabetic episodes. The entries revealed Derek's pattern with chilling clarity. Head gradually increased Harold's insulin doses while telling him they were the same strength, causing dangerous blood sugar drops that would weaken Harold and make him more dependent on Derek's care. Then Head blamed Harold's worsening condition for his confusion about business matters, gradually taking over more financial responsibilities. One journal entry from 6 months before Harold's death made me gasp aloud. I finally understand Derek's plan. He wants me dead, but he needs it to look natural. A diabetic man in his 70s dying from complications isn't suspicious. Has been slowly poisoning me, while positioning himself to inherit everything. The worst part is how he pretends to care, holding my hand while he injects the very medicine that's killing me. But Harold had been smarter than Derek realized. Head started testing his own blood sugar independently, documenting the discrepancies between what Derek told him and what the machines actually showed. Head photographed the insulin vials Derek brought, then researched their actual contents through his doctor friends. The insulin Derek was administering wasn't just the wrong dosage. It was a completely different type, one designed to create severe hypoglycemic episodes in someone with Harold's medical profile. Harold had also discovered something else that made my blood freeze. Derek had done this before. Tucked between the journal pages was a newspaper clipping from 15 years ago. Harold's father, Derek's grandfather, had died at age 68 from an accidental insulin overdose. The article mentioned that Derek, then a young nursing student, had been caring for his grandfather's diabetes in the months before his death. Harold had tracked down the medical examiner's report through old contacts. The insulin levels in his father's blood were consistent with a massive overdose. But the death was ruled accidental because his grandson was a medical professional who supposedly knew proper dosing. Derek had killed his grandfather for inheritance money and gotten away with it. Now Head killed his father and planned to steal everything Harold had worked for his entire life. But that wasn't the worst part. According to Harold's final entries, Derek had already been laying groundwork to have me declared mentally incompetent due to grief-induced dementia. Had been telling Harold's business partners and friends that I was struggling with reality and would need professional care after Harold passed. Derek had chosen this remote estate specifically because isolation would deteriorate my mental state, making his claims of incompetency more believable. He expected me to become completely dependent on his visits, grateful for any human contact, willing to sign whatever documents he brought me. Harold's last entry was a letter addressed directly to me. My dearest Anitra, if you're reading this, then Derek succeeded in killing me, and you're probably trapped at the estate like he planned. But you're stronger than you know. You've always been stronger than you let yourself believe. I've hidden evidence throughout this house. The truth about Derek's crimes, financial documents he doesn't know about, proof of what he's done and what he plans to do to you. Fight back, my love. Don't let him win. You have the intelligence and courage to stop him. But you have to believe in yourself. I love you always, Harold. I clutched the journal and felt something shift inside me. The crushing grief that had consumed me since Harold's death was transforming into something sharper, more focused. Harold hadn't just left me evidence. Head left me a mission. Derek thought Head abandoned a broken, helpless widow in the middle of nowhere. Instead, Head delivered the one person who could expose his crimes directly to all the evidence needed to destroy him. I wiped my tears and began searching the room more systematically. Harold mentioned hiding things throughout the house. It was time to find them all. Behind a loose floorboard near the window, I discovered a manila envelope containing photocopies of Derek's nursing license, his employment records, and complaints filed against him by other patients, families. Complaints that had been mysteriously withdrawn after Derek offered grief counseling and financial assistance. In the back of the bedroom closet, taped inside an old shoebox, I found bank account information for accounts Derek didn't know existed. Harold had been secretly moving money into secure investments, protecting our assets from Derek's theft. And in Harold's old desk drawer, wrapped in plastic and hidden behind a false panel, I found a satellite phone. It had 1 bar of battery remaining and a note in Harold's handwriting, for emergencies only. Derek doesn't know about this. I powered on the phone with trembling fingers. 1 bar of service, but it was enough to connect to the outside world. Derek had isolated me, but Harold had given me a lifeline. My grief was becoming something powerful and purposeful. Derek had underestimated both his father and his mother. Harold might be gone, but his love was still protecting me, still guiding me toward justice. It was time to turn the hunter into the hunted. With Harold's satellite phone clutched in my hands, I felt connected to the world for the first time in days. But I had to be strategic. The battery showed only 1 bar, meaning I had limited time to gather information and make contact with people who could help. I started by researching Derek online through the phone's basic internet connection. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Had been busier than I imagined. 3 days after Harold's funeral, Derek had filed preliminary paperwork with the county courthouse to begin competency proceedings against me. The documents painted a picture of a grief-stricken widow who was unable to care for herself and showing signs of severe mental deterioration. Had submitted statements from witnesses claiming I'd been talking to Harold as if he were still alive and refusing to acknowledge reality. All lies, but presented with medical terminology that made them sound credible. Derek had scheduled a formal competency hearing for next month, giving him time to gather more evidence of my deteriorating mental state. His plan was simple: isolate me until I actually did start showing signs of psychological breakdown, then use those symptoms to gain legal control over Harold's estate. But Harold had anticipated this too. I scrolled through the phone's contact list and found a number labeled JP Attorney, James Patterson, Harold's lawyer for over 20 years. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number. Patterson Law Office. Came a familiar voice. James? This is Anitra Williams, Harold's wife. There was a long pause. Anitra? Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for 3 weeks. Derek told me you were in some kind of specialized grief facility and couldn't be contacted. He said you'd suffered a complete breakdown and were under medical supervision. My heart pounded. James, I need you to listen very carefully. Derek has been lying to you. I'm not in any facility. He drove me to Harold's childhood estate and abandoned me here with no phone, no car, no way to contact anyone. And that's just the beginning. I spent the next 20 minutes outlining everything I'd discovered. Derek's theft from Harold's accounts, the evidence of murder through insulin manipulation, the competency proceedings Had filed without my knowledge. James' voice grew increasingly tense as I spoke. Anitra, if what you're saying is true, this is far worse than simple fraud. This is premeditated murder and elder abuse. But I need to tell you something that's going to upset you further. Derek has already been in my office twice, claiming to have power of attorney over your affairs. What? I never signed anything giving him power of attorney. He presented documents with your signature. I didn't question them because he said you were incapacitated and he was handling your legal matters as your son. Has already authorized me to begin liquidating some of Harold's business assets. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Derek's plan was even more elaborate than I'd realized. He wasn't just stealing Harold's money. He was systematically taking control of every aspect of my life, while I was isolated and unable to defend myself. James, those signatures are forgeries. I need you to stop all transactions immediately, and I need you to help me fight these competency proceedings. Of course. But Anitra, we need evidence. Legal proof of what Derek has been doing. Otherwise, it's just your word against his, and given that his filed documents claiming you're mentally unstable. I have evidence. Harold kept detailed records, financial documents, medical records, even a journal documenting Derek's plan to kill him. Harold knew what was happening and preserved proof. James was quiet for a moment. Can you photograph these documents and send them to me? I can file an emergency motion to stop Derek's legal proceedings, but I need evidence immediately. I spent the next hour using the satellite phone's camera to photograph every page of Harold's journal, every financial document, every piece of evidence Harold had collected. The phone's battery dropped steadily as I worked, but I managed to send everything to James' secure email. This is extraordinary evidence, James said after reviewing the photos. Harold was building a criminal case against Derek. With this documentation, I can not only stop the competency proceedings but file criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and potentially murder. How long will that take? I can file emergency motions tomorrow morning to freeze all assets and stop Derek's legal actions. But Anitra, You need to get somewhere safe. If Derek realizes you've discovered his plan and contacted authorities, you could be in physical danger. That's when I heard it. The rumble of an engine coming up the long gravel driveway. I crept to the window and saw headlights approaching the house. It was Derek's pickup truck, but he wasn't supposed to visit for several more days according to his own timeline. James. He's here. Derek just arrived at the estate. Don't let him know you've discovered anything. Act confused and helpless, exactly like he expects. I'm contacting the state police immediately, but it will take them time to reach your location. You need to play along until help arrives. The phone's battery died as Derek's truck door slammed shut outside. I quickly hid Harold's journal and documents back in their hiding places, then arranged myself on the living room couch to look exactly like Derek expected. A broken, isolated widow, barely hanging on to reality. Derek's footsteps echoed on the front porch. When he knocked, I made my voice sound weak and confused. Who's there? It's Derek, Mom. I came to check on you. I opened the door slowly, blinking as if the porch light hurt my eyes. Derek stood there with a concerned expression that I now recognized as completely fake. Behind him, 2 other men waited by his truck. Oh, Derek, I'm so glad you're here. I've been so confused and scared. I keep hearing Harold's voice in the house. Is that normal? Derek's eyes lit up with satisfaction. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. I brought some friends to help evaluate your condition. Mom. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Thompson. They're specialists in grief counseling and elder care. I glanced at the 2 men, who looked nothing like medical professionals. They wore cheap suits and had the demeanor of Derek's drinking buddies rather than doctors. Come in. Please. I've been so alone. As they entered the house, Derek put his arm around my shoulders in a gesture that once would have comforted me, but now made my skin crawl. Don't worry, Mom. We're going to take good care of you. Everything's going to be fine. But I could see it in his eyes. Derek hadn't come early just to check on me. Had come to accelerate his timeline. Something had made him nervous, and he wanted to finish what had started before anyone could interfere. I thought about Harold's final message about being stronger than I knew. Derek was about to discover just how much Head underestimated both his father and his mother. The game was about to begin, and this time, I held all the cards. Derek and his 2 fake doctors settled into the living room while I played the role of confused, helpless widow to perfection. Derek introduced his companions as Dr. Martinez and Dr. Thompson, specialists in geriatric psychiatry, but I could tell immediately they were amateurs. Real doctors would have brought medical bags, official identification, evaluation forms. These men carried nothing but smartphones and nervous energy. Mom, I know this has been difficult for you, Derek began, using the patronizing tone Head perfected over the past month. But Dr. Martinez and Dr. Thompson need to ask you some questions about how you've been feeling, just to make sure you're getting the help you need. I nodded weakly, wrapping Harold's old bathrobe tighter around myself. I've been having such strange thoughts, Derek. Sometimes I hear Harold calling my name from upstairs. Yesterday, I set 2 places at the dinner table because I forgot he was gone. Derek exchanged a meaningful glance with his accomplices. This was exactly what he wanted to hear. That's completely understandable, said the man calling himself Dr. Martinez. Grief can manifest in many confusing ways. Have you been taking care of yourself? Eating regularly? Keeping track of time? Time feels so strange here, I said, letting my voice waver. Sometimes I can't remember what day it is, and the house makes such frightening noises at night. I've been too scared to sleep in the bedroom where Harold and I used to stay when we visited his family. This was a lie, but it served my purpose. Derek needed to believe I was deteriorating mentally and hadn't been exploring the house thoroughly. Dr. Thompson leaned forward with practiced sympathy. Mrs. Williams, have you had any thoughts of harming yourself? Sometimes isolation can make grief feel overwhelming. I just miss Harold so much, I whispered, allowing real tears to flow. Some days I wonder if it would be easier to just join him. Derek's satisfaction was obvious. He was collecting exactly the statements he needed to prove my mental incompetency. What Derek didn't know was that while I played my role, I was also gathering intelligence about him. Throughout our conversation, I noticed Derek checking his phone frequently, looking nervous. His fake doctors kept glancing at their watches. Something had spooked Derek enough to move up his timeline. Mom, I think it would be best if you came to stay with me for a while, Derek said after an hour of fake evaluation questions. Just until you're feeling stronger. This house is too isolated, too full of memories. You need professional care. But Harold loved this place. I protested weakly. It feels like betraying his memory to leave. Dad wouldn't want you suffering alone, Derek replied smoothly. He'd want you to be somewhere safe and comfortable. I've found a lovely residential facility that specializes in grief counseling. Very peaceful, with trained staff and medical supervision. A nursing home where Derek could control my access to visitors and communications. Where he could continue his claims about my mental deterioration while slowly taking complete control of Harold's assets. I don't know, I said uncertainly. Everything feels so overwhelming. Why don't you pack a few things tonight? Derek suggested. Well, help you get settled tomorrow. Just bring what you need for a few days, while we sort everything out. After Derek and his accomplices left, promising to return in the morning, I immediately began the real work. I had perhaps 12 hours before Derek returned to take me away from all the evidence Harold had hidden throughout the house. Using a flashlight ID found in the kitchen, I systematically searched every room Harold had mentioned in his journal. Behind the water heater in the basement, I discovered a waterproof container holding copies of Harold's original will, backup documentation of Derek's financial crimes, and something that made my heart race, a recorded confession. Harold had hidden a small digital recorder in Derek's truck during one of his visits. On it, Derek could be heard talking to someone on his phone about the old man's insulin and how it won't be much longer now. He discussed transferring money from Harold's accounts and mentioned having Mom declared incompetent as soon as Harold was out of the picture. In the attic, wrapped in plastic and hidden behind old Christmas decorations, I found financial records proving Harold had secretly moved over $2 million into accounts Derek knew nothing about. Investment portfolios, property deeds, even a second life insurance policy Derek had never discovered. Harold had been protecting our assets while gathering evidence of Derek's crimes. My husband had been fighting back, even while Derek was slowly killing him. Most importantly, I found Harold's backup communication system. Not just the satellite phone, but a CB radio setup hidden in the barn that could reach emergency services. Harold had been planning to expose Derek, but died before he could act. I spent the remaining hours before dawn creating my own evidence file. I photographed every document, copied the audio recording to multiple devices, and prepared a complete dossier of Derek's crimes. I also practiced my helpless widow act, perfecting the confused, dependent persona Derek expected to see. By morning, I was ready for Derek's return. He thought he was collecting a broken, isolated woman who would gratefully accept whatever help he offered. Instead, he was walking into a trap set by the very evidence He'd tried to hide. I heard Derek's truck approaching just after sunrise. Through the window, I watched him climb out with his fake doctors and another man I didn't recognize. This fourth person carried an official-looking briefcase and wore the kind of cheap suit government workers preferred. Derek knocked on the door with false cheerfulness. "Good morning, Mom. Ready for your new start?" I opened the door wearing the same confused expression from the night before. "Derek? I'm sorry, I didn't sleep well. What day is it? It's Monday morning. Remember? We discussed moving you somewhere safer yesterday." I blinked slowly, as if struggling to recall. Yesterday? Was that yesterday? Sometimes the days blur together here. Derek's companion stepped forward. "Mrs. Williams. I'm Tom Bradley from Adult Protective Services. Derek contacted us because he's concerned about your welfare. We just want to make sure you're receiving appropriate care." A social worker. Derek had brought official muscle to make his intervention look legitimate. "I don't understand," I said, backing away from the door. "Am I in trouble?" "Not at all," Bradley assured me. "Your son is worried about your safety in this isolated location. We just want to discuss some options that might be better for you." As they entered the house, I noticed Derek surveying the rooms with sharp eyes. He was checking to see if I'd been exploring, looking for signs that I'd discovered his secrets. But everything appeared exactly as He'd left it. The helpless widow act was working perfectly. What Derek didn't realize was that while he thought he was executing the final phase of his plan, I was actually gathering the last pieces of evidence I needed to destroy him completely. Because James Patterson hadn't been idle overnight either. And Derek was about to discover that underestimating both Harold Williams and Anitra Williams was the biggest mistake of his criminal career. Derek and his entourage settled into the living room, with the confidence of predators surrounding wounded prey. Tom Bradley, the social worker, opened his briefcase and spread official-looking forms across the coffee table, while Derek's fake doctors positioned themselves on either side of me like concerned medical professionals. Mrs. Williams, Bradley began in a gentle but official tone. Your son has expressed serious concerns about your ability to live independently. The isolation here, combined with your grief, seems to be affecting your mental stability. I hugged Harold's bathrobe closer and nodded uncertainly. I've been having such confusing thoughts. Sometimes I can't tell if Harold is really gone, or if this is all a terrible dream. Derek leaned forward with practiced sympathy. Mom, you've been talking to Dad as if he's still here. You've been forgetting to eat, forgetting what day it is. Yesterday, you couldn't even remember our conversation. I'm trying to remember, I whispered, letting my voice shake. But everything feels so foggy since Harold died. What none of them knew was that Id found Harold's hidden recording device the night before and activated it. Every word of this conversation was being captured, adding to the evidence that would eventually destroy Derek's credibility. Bradley consulted his notes. Your son mentioned you've expressed thoughts of self-harm. Is that accurate? Sometimes I wonder if it would be easier to just join Harold, I said, repeating the same words from the previous evening. This house feels so empty without him. Derek's satisfaction was obvious. He was collecting exactly the statements he needed for his competency case. Dr. Martinez cleared his throat importantly. Mrs. Williams, based on our preliminary evaluation yesterday, we believe you're experiencing a severe grief reaction complicated by social isolation. Without proper intervention, your condition could deteriorate significantly. What kind of intervention? I asked, blinking as if struggling to follow the conversation. We've found an excellent residential facility, Derek said smoothly. Professional staff, medical supervision, other people dealing with similar losses. You wouldn't be alone anymore. But Harold loved this house. He grew up here. How can I leave? Dad wouldn't want you suffering, Derek insisted. He'd want you somewhere safe and comfortable. The facility has beautiful gardens, group activities, trained counselors. It's exactly what you need right now. Bradley slid a form across the table toward me. This is just a temporary guardianship agreement. It gives Derek legal authority to make decisions about your care until you're feeling stronger. Standard procedure, in cases like this. I stared at the document with apparent confusion, but I was actually reading every word carefully. It was exactly what Harold's journal had predicted. Derek was trying to gain complete legal control over my life and finances, under the guise of medical necessity. I don't understand all these legal words, I said helplessly. Don't worry about the details, Derek assured me. It's just paperwork to make sure you get the help you need. Dr. Thompson can explain anything you're confused about. Dr. Thompson nodded sagely. Mrs. Williams, your son has your best interests at heart. This arrangement will ensure you receive appropriate medical and psychological support during your recovery. As they continued their performance, Derek excused himself to use the bathroom. I knew he was actually checking the house for signs that had been exploring beyond the main living areas. When he returned, his expression was relaxed. Everything appeared exactly as had left it. What Derek didn't see was Tom Bradley's growing discomfort with the situation. Real social workers were trained to recognize coercive tactics, and something about Derek's presentation was triggering Bradley's professional instincts. Mrs. Williams, Bradley said carefully, do you feel pressured to sign these documents? You have the right to independent legal representation before making any decisions about guardianship. Derek's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Bradley, my mother is clearly not in a state to make rational decisions about legal representation. She can barely remember what day it is. I understand your concern, Bradley replied, but legal protocol requires that Mrs. Williams be informed of her rights regardless of her current mental state. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Actually, I said, allowing my voice to grow slightly stronger, I think I would like to speak with a lawyer. Harold always said important decisions should involve legal advice. Derek's mask slipped for just a second, revealing a flash of anger before he resumed his concerned expression. Mom, involving lawyers will just complicate things and delay getting you the help you need. But Harold trusted lawyers. I insisted, with growing confidence. He always said James Patterson was the smartest man he knew. James Patterson, Bradley looked interested. Is he your family attorney? Derek jumped in quickly. Patterson has been trying to contact my mother, but she's been too confused to handle legal discussions. That's part of why we need guardianship arrangements. I looked directly at Derek for the first time during the entire conversation. But Derek, didn't James call you? He said he needed to discuss Harold's will with both of us together. Derek's face went pale. When did you talk to James Patterson? I'm not sure, I said, reverting to my confused persona. Time feels so strange here. Was it yesterday? Last week? He said something about irregularities in Harold's accounts. Something about signatures that didn't look right. The fake doctors exchanged nervous glances. Tom Bradley was now watching Derek with obvious suspicion. Mrs. Williams, Bradley said slowly. Are you saying you've been in contact with your attorney recently? I think so, I replied, uncertainly. He seemed very concerned about something. He kept asking about Derek and the business accounts. Derek stood abruptly. Mom's obviously confused about time and events. She hasn't spoken to anyone in weeks. That's exactly why she needs professional supervision. But Bradley was now fully alert to the inconsistencies in Derek's story. Mr. Williams, if your mother has been in contact with legal counsel, we need to postpone any guardianship proceedings until her attorney can be consulted. That's completely unnecessary, Derek snapped, his calm facade finally cracking. My mother is clearly incapable of rational communication with attorneys or anyone else. That's when I heard the sound that would change everything. Multiple vehicles coming up the gravel driveway. Through the window, I could see 3 cars approaching the house. The lead vehicle was a police cruiser. Derek saw them too, and the color drained completely from his face. Mrs. Williams, came a voice through a bullhorn. This is State Police Detective Sarah Martinez. We need to speak with you about some financial irregularities reported by your attorney. Derek's fake Dr. Martinez looked like he was about to bolt for the back door. Tom Bradley was staring at Derek with complete understanding of how badly had been manipulated. I stood up slowly, letting Harold's bathrobe fall away to reveal that I was fully dressed underneath in my best suit and pearls. My posture straightened. My voice became clear and strong, and I looked Derek directly in the eyes. Actually, Derek, I've been in constant contact with James Patterson and Detective Martinez and the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. They're all very interested in your activities over the past 3 years. Derek's mouth fell open as the full scope of his miscalculation became clear. You see, son, you made the same mistake with me that you made with your father. You assumed that love and grief make people weak and helpless. But Harold taught me that sometimes the people who love you most are also the ones strong enough to stop you when you've become dangerous. The police were now surrounding the house, and Derek's fake doctors were being placed in handcuffs outside. Derek stared at me in shock. You've been faking this whole time. Every single minute since you abandoned me here, I replied. Harold left me everything I needed to destroy you, Derek. Evidence of the theft. Evidence of his murder. Evidence of your plan to steal everything he worked for his entire life. Tom Bradley was watching this transformation with amazement. Mrs. Williams, you're obviously completely competent and aware. How long have you been planning this? I smiled at him warmly. Since the moment I found Harold's journal and realized my son killed his father for money. Harold always said Derek was smart, but he never learned the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Detective Martinez entered the house with her team, and Derek Williams was finally about to face justice for his crimes. But the real satisfaction wasn't watching Derek get arrested. It was knowing that Harold's love had guided me to this moment of strength, and that Id honored his memory by refusing to become the victim Derek expected me to be. Detective Martinez entered the living room with 2 other officers, her badge clearly visible and her demeanor professionally serious. Derek stood frozen in the center of the room while his fake doctors were being processed outside, and Tom Bradley watched everything with growing amazement. Mrs. Williams, Detective Martinez said, I'm glad to see you're safe. Mr. Patterson has been very worried since your son reported you missing and mentally incapacitated. Derek found his voice. Detective, I don't know what my mother has told you, but she's been suffering from severe grief-related dementia. She's been having paranoid delusions about me and making false accusations. This is exactly why we need guardianship proceedings. Is that so? Martinez replied calmly. Then perhaps you can explain these financial records, showing unauthorized transfers from your father's business accounts to accounts under your control. She opened her briefcase and spread copies of the documents I'd photographed across the coffee table. Derek's forged signatures, the fake invoices, the systematic theft of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Derek's confidence wavered but didn't break. I was helping Dad manage his finances. He was getting confused about money in his final months. Those transfers were authorized, really. Martinez pulled out another set of papers. Because we have your father's medical records showing his mental faculties were completely intact until his death. We also have his personal journal documenting your theft and his growing suspicion that you were manipulating his insulin dosages. Derek went completely white. That's impossible. Dad never kept a journal. I stepped forward, no longer playing the confused widow. Actually, Derek, Harold kept detailed records of everything you did to him. Every forged check, every unauthorized transfer, every insulin injection that made him sicker instead of better. Mrs. Williams has provided us with extensive documentation, Martinez continued, including audio recordings of your conversations about your father's death and your plans to gain control of his assets through competency proceedings against your mother. Derek's fake composure finally shattered. You can't prove any of this. It's just the paranoid fantasies of a grieving old woman and the rambling writing of a sick man. That's when Martinez played the recording Harold had captured in Derek's truck. Derek's own voice filled the room, discussing the old man's insulin and how it won't be much longer now. His casual conversation about transferring money and having his mother declared incompetent as soon as Harold was out of the picture. Derek sank into a chair, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his arrogance. Derek Williams, Martinez said formally. You're under arrest for the murder of Harold Williams, attempted financial fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. As the detective read Derek his rights, I felt a profound sense of closure washing over me. Harold's love had protected me even after his death, guiding me to the evidence I needed and giving me the strength to use it. Tom Bradley approached me with obvious respect. Mrs. Williams, I owe you an apology. Your son presented a very convincing case that you were mentally incapacitated. Derek has always been good at manipulation, I replied. But Harold taught me that the truth has a way of surfacing if you're patient and strategic about revealing it. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, he turned back to me with a mixture of rage and disbelief. You think you've won? You have no idea what you're dealing with. I know things about this family that could destroy you. I looked at my son with sadness rather than anger. Derek, the only thing you knew about this family was how to exploit our love for you. Harold and I spent 30 years protecting you from the consequences of your choices, but some mistakes are too dangerous to forgive. Detective Martinez handed me her card. Mrs. Williams, we'll need your testimony for the trial, but the evidence you've provided should be sufficient for conviction on all charges. Your husband built an airtight case against your son. Over the following hours, as police processed the scene and collected evidence, I learned the full scope of Derek's criminal activities. His fake doctors were actually former co-workers from his previous nursing job, where Derek had been fired for suspicious patient deaths. They'd been helping him run insurance fraud schemes for months. The social worker, Tom Bradley, turned out to be legitimate, but had been completely deceived by Derek's manipulation. Derek had provided falsified medical records and forged statements from witnesses to support his competency claims. James Patterson arrived by evening with paperwork to immediately reverse all of Derek's unauthorized financial transactions. The money Derek had stolen was recovered, plus additional assets Harold had hidden that Derek never discovered. Harold was brilliant, Patterson explained as we sat in the estate's kitchen. He knew what Derek was planning months before his death and systematically protected your inheritance while gathering evidence of the crimes. I thought about Harold's final journal entry, his message about being stronger than I knew. Harold always believed in me more than I believed in myself. Even dying, he was still taking care of me. The insulin manipulation charges are going to be the most serious, Patterson continued. We have Harold's medical records showing the discrepancies, plus testimony from his doctor about the suspicious changes in his condition. Derek's nursing background actually works against him here, because he can't claim ignorance about insulin dosages. As night fell, and the police finally departed, I stood alone in the house where this entire nightmare had begun. But it no longer felt like a prison. Harold's presence seemed stronger here. Not as a ghost or memory, but as a continuing love that had guided me through the darkness. Derek had thought Head left me here to deteriorate and become dependent on his mercy. Instead, Head delivered me to exactly the place where Harold's love was strongest and his evidence was most complete. I walked through the rooms where Harold had spent his childhood summers, touching the model airplanes and baseball trophies, feeling the peace Head found in this place. Head chosen to hide his evidence here not just for security, but because he knew I would feel his love most strongly in the place that had shaped him. Derek was right about one thing. I had won, but not in the way he meant. I'd won the right to honor Harold's memory by refusing to become a victim. I'd won the strength to fight back when someone tried to exploit my grief. I'd won the knowledge that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you powerful enough to protect what matters most. The morning would bring legal proceedings, financial recovery, and the long process of rebuilding my life. But tonight, I felt Harold's love surrounding me like a warm embrace. Proud of the woman I'd become in fighting for the truth, Head died, protecting. Derek had underestimated both his father and his mother. That mistake would cost him his freedom, but more importantly, it had taught me that I was much stronger than I'd ever imagined. 6 months later, I stood in the courthouse as Judge Patricia Reynolds sentenced Derek Williams to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The charges included first-degree murder, attempted murder, elder abuse, financial fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence Harold had carefully preserved, combined with my testimony and the recordings I'd captured, created an overwhelming case that Derek's expensive attorney couldn't challenge. Derek showed no remorse during sentencing. Even when Judge Reynolds described his crimes as a calculated betrayal of the most fundamental family bonds, Derek maintained his innocent facade. He still believed he was the victim of circumstances rather than the architect of his own destruction. James Patterson sat beside me throughout the proceedings, helping me understand the legal complexities while providing emotional support. After Derek was led away to begin his life sentence, Patterson and I walked outside into the bright spring sunshine. "Harold would be proud of how you handled this," Patterson said as we reached his car. "Derek thought Head found the perfect victim in a grieving widow, but he completely misjudged your character." "I misjudged my own character too," I admitted. "For 40 years, I let Harold and Derek make most of the important decisions because I believed I wasn't smart enough or strong enough to handle complicated situations. Harold's death forced me to discover capabilities I never knew I had. The financial recovery had been complete. Derek's theft was reversed, Harold's hidden assets were restored to my control, and the life insurance Derek thought he would inherit was paid out properly. I was now a wealthy woman with complete independence. But more importantly, I was a confident woman who understood her own strength. I'd decided to keep the family estate as a retreat while maintaining a home in town. The house where Derek had tried to break me had become my sanctuary, filled with Harold's love and memories of our victory over Derek's evil plans. I'd also begun speaking at senior centers about financial elder abuse and family manipulation. Too many older people suffer in silence when family members exploit their love and trust. My experience with Derek taught me to recognize the warning signs and help other families protect themselves. "Have you heard anything about Derek's situation in prison?" Patterson asked as we drove back toward town. "His nursing license was permanently revoked, and he's been placed in protective custody because his crimes make him a target for other inmates," I replied. "Has discovered that being intelligent and manipulative doesn't help much when you're surrounded by people who understand violence better than you understand psychological manipulation." We drove in comfortable silence for several miles, past the rolling hills and farmland that had once seemed like a prison but now represented freedom and possibility. "Anitra," Patterson said finally, "I hope you don't mind me asking, but what was the turning point for you? When did you realize you had the strength to fight back instead of becoming the victim Derek expected?" I thought about that question for a long moment, watching the landscape roll past the car window. I think it was when I read Harold's final letter to me in his journal. He wrote that I was stronger than I knew, and that I'd always been stronger than I let myself believe. For the first time in my life, I chose to believe in Harold's assessment of my character, rather than my own fears about my limitations. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what we're truly capable of." "I didn't lose everything," I corrected gently. "I lost Harold, which was devastating. But in fighting to honor his memory and protect his legacy, I found parts of myself that had been sleeping for decades. Derek thought grief would make me weak and dependent. Instead, It burned away my fears and revealed my true strength. As we reached the edge of town, I asked Patterson to drive me past the nursing home where Derek had planned to place me. The Sunset Manor Care Facility was a depressing complex of institutional buildings surrounded by chain-link fencing. Residents sat in wheelchairs along the covered walkways, staring into space with vacant expressions. Derek chose that place specifically because it would have isolated me from family and friends while giving him complete control over my finances and medical care. I said as we drove slowly past the entrance, within 6 months, I would have become exactly the helpless, confused woman he claimed I already was. But instead, you're thriving, Patterson observed. Instead, I'm living the life Harold always believed I was capable of living. I make my own decisions, manage my own finances, choose my own activities and relationships. I'm finally the partner Harold deserved, rather than the dependent he protected. That evening, I sat in Harold's favorite chair at the estate, reading his journal one more time. His final entry to me had become my daily inspiration. My dearest Anitra, if you're reading this, then Derek succeeded in killing me, and you're probably trapped at the estate like he planned. But you're stronger than you know. You've always been stronger than you let yourself believe. Fight back, my love. Don't let him win. You have the intelligence and courage to stop him, but you have to believe in yourself. I love you always, Harold. Harold had been right about everything. I was stronger than I knew. I did have the intelligence and courage to stop Derek. Most importantly, I finally believed in myself the way Harold had always believed in me. Derek had made a fundamental mistake in his understanding of grief and love. He saw Harold's death as an opportunity to exploit my vulnerability, assuming that loss would make me weak and desperate for help from anyone, even someone with malicious intentions. But Derek never understood that the deepest grief comes from the deepest love. And deep love doesn't make you fragile. It makes you fierce. When someone threatens what you love most, whether that's a person, a memory, or a legacy, grief transforms into the most powerful force for justice and protection. Harold's love didn't end with his death. It lived on in the evidence he preserved, the strength Head always seen in me, and the determination Head instilled to never give up on truth and justice. I learned that grief doesn't make you weak, it burns away everything false and reveals your true strength. The people who try to exploit your pain often underestimate the power that comes from loving deeply and losing deeply. Derek saw me as a victim, but Harold saw me as a survivor. In honoring Harold's memory by fighting back, I discovered I was both stronger and braver than I ever knew. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give to those we've lost is to become who they always believed we could be. Harold spent 40 years loving me into strength, even though I was too afraid to claim that strength while he was alive. His death finally forced me to become the powerful, independent woman Head always known I was capable of being. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you had during a difficult time in your life? Sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our deepest capabilities. Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about moments when you surprised yourself with your own resilience and courage. If this story touched your heart or inspired you to think differently about your own inner strength, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding hope and power in unexpected places. And share this with someone who might need to be reminded of their own hidden strength. We never know who needs to hear that they're braver than they believe. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of this community where we support each other through life's most challenging moments. Remember that you're stronger than you know. And sometimes the people who try to break us end up revealing just how unbreakable we really are. Until next time, keep believing in your own power to overcome whatever challenges life brings your way.